The lobby is for clients. Find somewhere else to be.
The lobby is for customers. Find somewhere else.
The shoulder came first. No warning. Full momentum.
Does he know who this man is?
I don't think so. I hope the consequences aren't bad.
The way a door swings hard into a wall, and Marcus Webb's back hit the marble with a sound that swallowed the whole corridor.
I don't want to find you here again.
The mop handle cracked against the floor like a gavel. Every associate stepping off the elevator froze. Coffee cups stopped mid-air. One woman's heel caught mid-step, and she grabbed the wall. Nobody breathed. Marcus steadied himself with one large hand flat against the marble. A black man in his 50s, broad-shouldered, grey uniform, scuffed boots, the gold cross on his chain catching the pale February light from the east, facing windows. He said nothing. He looked at the mop handle rolling slow across the wet marble, 3 full rotations, until it came to rest against the baseboard. Garrett Holloway was already inside the elevator. He did not turn around. He straightened his lapel with 2 fingers, eyes on his phone, and delivered the second line to the closing doors. "Don't let me find you up here again." The doors slid shut. The mop handle stopped rolling. But here's what Garrett Holloway didn't know. The man he just shoved out of that elevator owned 61% of the firm he was riding up to save. Every chair in that conference room. Every window overlooking Lake Michigan. The whole operation, kept alive 3 years ago by a single $2.3 million injection from a blind trust, signed by one man, in a quiet office, with no fanfare and no credit taken. Have you ever worked somewhere so long and so hard that the place forgot you with the reason it was still standing? But before we get to that, let me take you back 14 months to the night Marcus Webb first walked through these doors. It was a Tuesday in December, cold enough to feel through the service entrance walls. Marcus signed in at 11:45 p.m. The overnight shift. The one nobody wanted. He had chosen it on purpose. The building was 150 North Wacker Drive, 41st floor, glass and steel above the river bend. The kind of address that had a different weight depending on which entrance you used. Marcus had used both. He knew the difference. He chose the service door that night, not because he had to, but because he was watching something, and you watch better from the floor up. He pulled the grey uniform over his shoulders and felt the weight of it. Standard issue. His name was not on it. Nobody's name was. The fabric smelled faintly of industrial lemon cleaner, the same smell his mother had carried home on her clothes every night for 31 years. He had not forgotten that smell. He had never tried to. Marcus Webb had run a logistics company out of a warehouse in Joliet for 19 years. 200 employees. A fleet of 43 trucks. He had built it from a single rented van and a cell phone with a cracked screen, and he had sold it at 47 for a number he still did not say out loud in ordinary conversation. He was not flash. He had never been flash. His mother had taught him that a quiet man in a room full of loud ones sees everything, and she had been right about most things. The firm he had saved, Pinnacle Capital Group, had been 3 business days from dissolving when his attorney first brought him the term sheet. 2 founding partners had cashed out too fast and too greedily. The remaining partners were good at their work but short on capital and shorter on options. The blind trust structure was his idea. Nobody needed to know the name behind the money. The firm would be stabilized. The staff would keep their jobs. The culture, whatever it was, would have time to show itself. That was the part that mattered to Marcus. He wanted to see the culture. So he mopped floors. He emptied bins. He learned which associates stayed until 9 and which ones were gone by 4:30. He learned that the partner's kitchen was always out of decaf by Wednesday, that the copier on the south wall jammed once a week at the same spot in the paper tray, and that Garrett Holloway left his coffee cup on the edge of whatever surface was nearest him and never once moved it to the sink. You can tell a great deal about a person by what they leave for others to clean up. The first morning Diane Okafor handed Marcus a coffee through the lobby window, a Tuesday, his fourth week on the floor, 7:20 a.m., the sky outside still purple-black. She had looked right at him through the glass partition and said, "Good morning, Mr. Webb." He had gone still. Not because the name startled him. It was his name, but because it was the first time in 11 weeks that anyone on the 41st floor had used it, and the sound of it landed somewhere behind his ribs and stayed there. He had nodded, taken the cup with both hands, and said, "Good morning." "Thank you," she had said. "You're welcome," with the matter-of-fact warmth of someone who had been raised to treat service workers like people because her grandmother had been one. Her name tag read Diane, security. He noticed she kept reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck, the same way his mother had. He had thought about that on the walk back to the supply closet. He had thought about his mother a lot in those early weeks. She had cleaned offices for 31 years. She had never once complained about the work. What she had complained about, rarely, quietly, on Sunday evenings, was the way some people looked through her, as if she were a piece of furniture that happened to move. Marcus had promised her, in the last months before she died, that he would never lose sight of that weight. He had meant it. He had not fully understood, until he put on the grey uniform himself, just how precisely correct she had been. The prop he carried through those early weeks was a simple thing. He had brought it from home on the first night and kept it in his breast pocket from then on, his reading glasses folded in a soft cloth pouch. They had belonged to his mother. The frames were old, slightly too wide for his face, gold-toned metal, one arm repaired with a thin wrap of electrical tape she had applied herself and never bothered to replace. He wore his own glasses at home. These he carried. They were not for reading. They were for the moment he chose. He had always known there would be a moment. He told himself, on quiet mornings pushing the mop down the long corridor between the partners' offices, that the glasses were just a reminder. Don't forget where you came from. Don't forget who made you. He was not sure Diane Okafor knew any of this, but she kept bringing the coffee every Tuesday, and she kept using his name. By the second month, Marcus had a clear picture of the floor's social architecture. It was not complicated. Garrett Holloway was the sun that everything orbited, and the orbit had taught people to move in particular ways without thinking about it. At 9:06 a.m., on a Thursday in January, Marcus was mopping the corridor near the copy room when Holloway walked past with two partners behind him. Not past Marcus exactly, through him, the way you move through a space, not around a person. Marcus stepped to the side. He pressed the mop handle lightly against his hip and waited for the three men to pass. Holloway did not look at him. Neither did the partners. One of them, a heavy-set man named Burroughs, who Marcus had seen work genuinely late hours and genuinely hard, did glance sideways for just a fraction of a second. Not an apology, not acknowledgement, just a reflexive animal awareness that a human being was standing there. Then he looked away. That was month 2. By month 3, it had gotten quieter, which was worse. Quiet meant comfortable. Quiet meant nobody felt the discomfort of ignoring a person. because ignoring a person had become the default setting. Marcus was infrastructure. He was the clean floor under their feet, the empty bin beside their desk, the glass conference table polished to a mirror finish every Monday and Thursday morning. You know that feeling when you've done something so well for so long that the thing itself disappears and only the absence of it would ever be noticed. That was Marcus Webb in month 3 of working inside his own investment. The office manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Priya, who ran the administrative side of the floor with something close to military efficiency, had come to him in the break room one afternoon in early February. "We have a client tour at 2, she said, not looking up from her tablet. "Can you finish this wing and move to the east corridor? The walkthrough comes through here." Marcus had looked at her. "Sure," he said. She had already turned away. He thought, "I own the east corridor too." He did not say it. He picked up the mop and moved to the east corridor. There was a first-year associate, young, maybe 24, with the specific nervous energy of someone who had arrived at this job with large ambitions and was in the process of learning how slowly large institutions moved. His name was Theo. Marcus knew his name because Theo was one of 3 people on the floor who said hello in the morning, and he said it like he meant it, not the reflexive professional courtesy, but the real kind, the kind with eye contact. Theo had been at the copy room at 11:52 a.m. on a Tuesday in month 4 when Holloway had stopped in the hallway and said, to no one, to the air, to the architecture of the building itself, facilities really needs to schedule these people when the floor is empty. Marcus was 6 feet away, pushing the cart. Theo had looked up from the copier tray, not at Holloway, at Marcus. A quick look, 2 seconds, maybe less, and then away. But Marcus caught it. The look said, "I heard that," and "I don't know what to do with it," and "I'm sorry." It was the first fissure, the first sign that the silence in the building was not unanimous. Marcus had finished the corridor and moved on. He had noted it the way he noted everything on this floor, carefully, without reaction stored. You've met someone like Garrett Holloway. You might not have known his name, but you've met him. He is not the loudest person in the room. That would require too much energy, and Holloway was fundamentally a conservationist when it came to his own effort. He deployed his cruelty efficiently. Small doses, precisely timed, always before an audience, never on the record. He had made managing partner at 41 through a combination of genuine competence and a talent for positioning himself adjacent to other people's success at exactly the right moment. He had survived the firm's near collapse 3 years ago by doing what he always did in a crisis, projecting absolute confidence to the outside world while quietly looking for the exit. When the capital appeared and the crisis passed, he had told the story ever since as one of his finest hours. He had never asked where the money came from. He had not wanted to know. The Patek Philippe on his wrist had been a gift from his father, a man who had built a small regional brokerage in the 80s and taught his son that the only people who mattered in a building were the people whose names were on the checks. Everyone else was ambient. Holloway had taken that lesson to heart. He had refined it. He did not even bother with contempt. Most of the time, contempt requires you to register a person first. By month 8, that calculus had shifted slightly. Not in Holloway's interior, that stayed fixed. But he had started performing his disregard. Which meant, Marcus thought, that something on the floor had started watching, even if it had not started speaking yet. The Friday morning all hands was at 8:15 a.m., the third Friday of the month, 17 people in the glass conference room. Marcus arrived with a fresh liner for the wastebasket near the door. Standard, he had done it every third Friday for 8 months. He pushed the door open quietly. Holloway stopped mid-sentence. He looked at the Patek Philippe with 2 fingers resting on the crystal. The signature gesture, the one that told you that your time was being measured against his, and said, "Can we get a 5-minute warning next time? Some of us are trying to work." The laugh was brief, flat. It came from 2 people near the back and died before it reached the front of the room. Not cruel laughter. Social reflex. The kind your throat produces before your brain approves it. Marcus felt it on the back of his neck. Warm, then cold. The way a door opened in winter feels on your skin before you know it's open. He tied the liner with 1 clean knot, picked it up, walked to the door. He did not hurry. He did not slow down. He walked at exactly the pace he always walked. At the door, without turning, he was aware of something. He could not see it, but he had been reading rooms for a long time, and some awareness is not visual. He knew that Holloway's eyes had followed him to the door. Not with satisfaction, not with the settled pleasure of a small cruelty landed cleanly, with something else. A faint unease, the kind a person feels when they have done something in public that felt safer in private. Marcus let the door close behind him. In the hallway, alone, he exhaled once, slow, from the bottom of his lungs, and then he kept walking. If you've ever had to swallow something that deserved a response and kept moving anyway, you know what that walk felt like. You know the kind of quiet it takes. Not weakness. Not surrender. Something older and harder than both. If you're watching this and it's hitting close, hit that subscribe button. People need to hear these stories. And stick with me, because we are not close to done. The weeks after the all hands were quieter in the particular way that follows a public moment nobody wants to address. Holloway did not repeat the gesture in a meeting room. He had sensed, correctly, that it had not landed the way he wanted. So he moved the performance to corridors, to elevator lobbies, to the small sovereign territories where there was less of a crowd to read. One morning in month 10, at 9:06 a.m., a Thursday, the light coming in grey and flat through the east windows, Marcus was in the partner's corridor, replacing a burned-out bulb in the ceiling fixture when Holloway turned the corner and stopped. He looked at Marcus on the stepladder. Then he looked at his phone. Then, without addressing Marcus at all, he said to the corridor, "How long does one light bulb take?" It was not a question. There was no inflection, no rise at the end. It was a statement delivered at the air, the way you'd speak to furniture that had disappointed you. Marcus finished threading the bulb into the socket, came down the ladder, folded it. 30 seconds, he said. Holloway had already turned the corner. He either did not hear it or chose not to. Marcus folded the ladder against the wall. He stood in the corridor alone for a moment. Through the east window, he could see the grey February sky over the river, the bridges still dark below. He thought about his daughter. She was in her 2nd year of medical school now, carrying a full course load, calling him on Sunday evenings. She did not know where her tuition came from. She thought it was a scholarship through the university's endowment fund. He had arranged it that way. She was going to be a doctor. She worked the way he had always worked, quietly, completely, without requiring anyone to notice. He was proud of her in a way that had no adequate words. He picked up the ladder and walked to the supply closet. The garment bag was on the second hook from the left. He had hung it there on Sunday evening. Charcoal wool, white shirt, the shoes in a bag on the shelf below. He had not touched it since. He would not need to touch it until the morning. He knew the morning was coming. He had known it for 3 weeks, since the firm's attorney had called his trust manager, and the trust manager had forwarded the single-line message, "Emergency resolution vote. Tuesday, February, 9 a.m. required signature. Marcus A. Webb, majority beneficial owner." He had read it on Sunday. He had hung the garment bag on Sunday. He had gone to bed at a reasonable hour and slept without difficulty, the way a man sleeps when he has decided what he is going to do and made peace with the cost of it. Tuesday was 3 days away. On Monday morning, at 7:55 a.m., Marcus was in the elevator lobby when 2 partners arrived together, Burroughs and a woman named Castillo, who Marcus had noted was the clearest thinker in the room whenever she spoke in meetings. They stepped out of the elevator, saw Marcus mopping, and Burroughs, out of some reflex Marcus did not try to interpret, said, "Watch the wet floor, Maria." Castillo stopped. "My name is Andrea," she said flatly. Burroughs blinked. "I know. Sorry, I meant," he gestured vaguely at the wet floor sign. "Watch it." She looked at the floor sign, then at Marcus. For just a moment. Marcus met her eyes briefly. He did not smile. He did not nod. He just held the look the way you hold a door for someone, steadily, without comment. She looked away, followed Burroughs toward the partners' corridor. But she had looked, and he had seen her see him. That mattered. Tuesday, February 6:45 a.m. cold, Marcus arrived at the service entrance in the dark, signed in, changed into the grey uniform, and began the morning floor. The lobby marble was still overnight cold under his boots. He worked methodically, southeast corner to northwest, the way he always did, and by 7:30 the floor was wet and clean, the smell of industrial lemon cleaner cutting through the first wave of coffee from the partner's kitchen. He was in the elevator lobby at 7:44 a.m. when Diane Okafor came through the lobby access door with a paper cup in each hand. "Tuesday," she said, and handed him the cup. He took it with both hands. "Tuesday," he said. She looked at him for a half-second longer than usual, something in his face, or in the stillness of the morning. "You okay, Mr. Webb?" "I'm good," he said. "Thank you, Diane," she nodded and went back through the door. He held the cup with both hands and looked out the east windows. The sky over Lake Michigan was just starting to separate into layers, dark at the top, a thin line of pale gray at the horizon. He thought about his mother. He thought about 31 years of gray uniforms and coffee cups left on counter edges. He thought about the sound the mop handle was going to make when it hit the floor. Because he had been on this floor long enough to know how everything echoed. And he had already, somewhere in the back of his mind, accepted that this was probably going to happen. He did not know it would be Holloway specifically. He had expected Holloway. But knowing and accepting are different things, and Marcus Webb had always done both. At 7:47 a.m., Garrett Holloway came through the stairwell door, moving fast. He was already on his phone. His jaw was tight. Something had gone wrong before he'd even reached the building. You could read it in the way his whole body was pointed forward, the way his feet hit the marble, the way he was not going to slow down for anything in the corridor, because the morning had already failed to cooperate, and he had decided, at some level below conscious thought, that the floor owed him a path. Marcus was in the center of the lobby. The wet floor sign was up. The mop was in his right hand. Holloway did not slow down. His shoulder caught Marcus with full momentum, and it was not a punch, not a shove in the theatrical sense, but the specific violence of being treated as an obstacle. The particular impact of a man who has never in his adult life had to adjust his trajectory for another human being in a corridor. Marcus's back hit the wall. His shoulder blades caught the marble. The mop handle went down. The crack rang through the corridor like a gavel hitting a bench. 3 associates had just stepped off the elevator. A woman with a portfolio bag. 2 men in morning suits. All 3 went still. One man's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. The woman's hand found the elevator door frame. The sound sat in the air. "The lobby is for clients," Holloway said, already inside the elevator, already reaching for the closed doors button. "Find somewhere else to be." He straightened his lapel with 2 fingers. He did not look up from his phone. "And don't let me find you up here again." The doors closed. The mop handle finished its 3rd rotation on the wet marble and came to rest against the baseboard. Marcus stood with his back flat against the wall, one hand still open at his side where the handle had been. His shoulder ached. He was aware of the 3 associates in the lobby, aware of the specific quality of their stillness, the way witnesses freeze not because they don't know what just happened, but because they don't know what to do with it. He looked at the mop handle. He breathed. He did not pick it up. He turned. He walked to hallway B. He opened the door of the supply closet. The fluorescent light came on with a hum, the smell of cleaner and cardboard filling the small space, and he stood in the doorway for one long moment with his hand on the zipper of the garment bag on the 2nd hook from the left. Have you ever had to decide whether the moment is finally worth it? Whether 14 months of silence was enough? Or whether you needed one more second to be sure? He pulled the zipper. The outside attorney, whose name was Raymond Chen, had come up the stairwell at 7:48 a.m., 2 minutes earlier than agreed, because Chen was that kind of attorney. He had the manila envelope in his inside jacket pocket and a very precise understanding of the morning's timeline. He had also, unfortunately, stepped into the elevator lobby just in time to watch Holloway's shoulder catch Marcus Webb and send the mop handle across the floor. Chen had stood very still in the stairwell doorway for a moment. He had worked with Marcus's trust for 3 years. He had never met Marcus in person. He had a photograph, the one from the logistics company's about page, 6 years old. Marcus in a conference room with a dark suit and an expression of composed authority. He had recognized him immediately, standing in the lobby in the gray uniform with his back against the marble wall. Chen had said nothing. He had understood, with the intuition of a good attorney, that he was not supposed to say anything. He had watched Marcus walk to hallway B. He had looked at the clock above the elevator doors, 7:48 a.m., 1 hour and 12 minutes to the resolution deadline. He had gone to the lobby bench to wait. At 8:23 a.m., the first partners began arriving. Burroughs first, then Castillo, then 3 others in quick succession. They came off the elevator into the lobby, and they all saw the same thing. The wet floor sign still standing, the mop handle leaning against the baseboard. No one moved it. Burroughs glanced at the corridor toward hallway B. He looked at Castillo. She was reading something on her phone, and her face was neutral, but her jaw had a particular set to it that Burroughs had learned over 6 years meant she was choosing not to say something she had decided to file. They walked toward the conference room by 8:50 a.m. The room was full. 6 partners, 4 associates. Holloway at the head of the table, jacket on, the Patek Philippe face up in front of him. The manila envelope that should have arrived from Chen was not on the table, and Chen himself was nowhere in the room. Holloway had called Chen's cell at 8:41 and gotten voicemail. The room was tight, with the particular dread of financial catastrophe. The held breath quality of people who have done the arithmetic and do not love the answer. If the resolution did not get the required signature by 9 a.m., the emergency restructuring terms would lapse. Investors would be notified. The firm's credit facility, which had already been flagged, would be reviewed at a level none of them wanted. At 8:58 a.m., Holloway looked at the clock above the door. At 9:00 a.m., he looked at it again. The room said nothing. At 9:04 a.m., Castillo said quietly, "We should know what our options are if the vote is void." Holloway looked at her. He did not answer. At 9:11 a.m., the conference room doors opened from the inside. Nobody in that room would describe, later, what they felt in the first 2 seconds. It was too fast and too strange, the brain offering frameworks and discarding them all simultaneously. Marcus Webb walked in wearing a charcoal wool suit. White shirt, no tie. His reading glasses were on his face, unfolded, settled, the old gold frames with the one arm wrapped in a thin coil of electrical tape, slightly too wide, the way his mother's glasses were always slightly too wide for his face when he tried them on as a child. His work boots, he had not brought dress shoes, and it would not have been right to pretend, were the same scuffed pair he had been wearing for 14 months. He was broad-shouldered and unhurried. He moved like a man who knew exactly where he was going, which he did, because he had mopped this floor every Monday and Thursday for over a year, and he could have walked to that table in the dark. Raymond Chen came in one step behind him. The room reorganized itself without anyone deciding to. Chairs shifted. Eyes moved. The geometry of 10 people understanding simultaneously that something had changed. Not what, not how, not the mechanism of it, but the fundamental fact of it. Holloway looked at Marcus. He looked at the charcoal suit, the reading glasses, the envelope in Chen's hands. His brain was offering him 4 explanations at once: service contractor, outside consultant, someone's guest, something he had arranged himself and forgotten, and it was rejecting all 4, because none of them fit what his body was telling him. And Garrett Holloway had spent 20 years not listening to his body, because his body was always pointing him toward things he didn't want to examine. Chen placed the manila envelope on the table and opened it with 2 hands. He set the resolution document flat on the table. 6 pages. Clean. The firm's registered agent stamp on page 1. And said, in the particular understated register of an attorney who has waited a long time to say something, "Mr. Webb, if you'll review and sign on page 6. Marcus sat in the chair to Holloway's left. Not the head. Not yet. He picked up the document with both hands and read page 6 with the patience of a man who has already read it several times and is now reading it in front of an audience, because the audience deserves to understand what they are seeing. The signature line read, Marcus A. Webb, Majority Beneficial Owner, Pinnacle Capital Group. Holloway's face changed. It was not theatrical. It was not a gasp, not a shout, not the kind of collapse you see on television. It was slower than that and worse. Color left his face the way light leaves a room when a cloud crosses the sun, not all at once, not sudden, but a steady, silent draining that moved from his cheeks to his jaw to somewhere behind his eyes. His right hand, resting on the table, went still. His fingers did not curl. They just stopped. Chen, still standing, turned the document so the table could read the signature line. Nobody spoke. The 6 partners, the 4 associates, 10 people in a room with a view of Lake Michigan on a Tuesday morning in February, they sat and they looked and they did not speak. Because the moment was reshaping itself in real time and the only appropriate response was to let it. Marcus reached into his breast pocket and took out a pen. He read page 6 one more time. Unhurried, he signed his full name. Marcus A. Webb. He set the pen down. He folded his hands on the table in front of him, the reading glasses still on his face, and he looked at Garrett Holloway for the first time all morning. He did not say a word. He did not need to. But here is what that room did not know yet. The thing that the document was about to make plain. The machinery underneath the moment. Chen cleared his throat once. He looked around the table, made brief eye contact with each partner, and then began. 3 years ago this March, Chen said, Pinnacle Capital Group had 72 hours of operating capital remaining. The founding partners had withdrawn. The credit facility was 3 days from being called. I was retained by a blind trust to execute an emergency equity purchase, $2.3 million, transferred on a Thursday, posted to the firm's operating account by Friday morning. He paused. The trust is named the Webb Family Trust. Marcus A. Webb is the sole beneficial owner. His ownership stake, in exchange for the capital injection, is 61% of Pinnacle Capital Group, majority beneficial ownership. He turned to page 1. The firm's articles of incorporation were amended that same month to require the written approval of the majority beneficial owner for any resolution requiring a 2/3 vote. This morning's emergency restructuring resolution is one such vote. Chen set the document down. Mr. Webb's signature, which he has just provided, makes the vote binding. Without it, the vote was void as of 9 a.m. Today, the room was silent. Burroughs was looking at the table. His jaw was working. Castillo was looking at Marcus. Not with shock, or not only shock, with something more complicated. Something that looked, from a certain angle, like the particular expression of a person watching a story arrive at its correct ending after a long time. Theo, the first-year associate, the young one who had met Marcus's eyes in the copy room 8 months ago, had his hands flat on the table and his face open in the unconcealed, unprofessional way of someone 24 years old watching something they will describe for the rest of their lives. Holloway had not moved. He was still seated at the head of the table, but the head of the table had changed its meaning. It had become, in the space of 3 minutes, a seat that required a new understanding of who it belonged to. His jacket was still on. His hands were still. The Patek Philippe on his wrist read 9:14 a.m. Chen said, quietly, procedurally, the way an attorney says something that is both necessary and already decided, Mr. Holloway, given the ownership structure now confirmed on the record, the procedural guidelines in the amended articles would require you to move to a non-voting seat for the remainder of this resolution meeting. Holloway did not respond immediately. The room waited. Then he stood. Slowly, he picked up the Patek Philippe and held it loosely in his palm. Not setting it down, not putting it away, just holding it, the way a person holds something they are not ready to let go of and not ready to look at. He moved 2 chairs to the right. He sat. His jacket creased across the back when he settled. He did not look at Marcus. Marcus watched him sit. Then, Marcus looked at the rest of the room. He spoke for the first time since entering the conference room, and his voice was the same voice he used in the lobby, in the supply closet, in the corridor at 9:06 a.m. On a Thursday, when a man told the air that a light bulb was taking too long. "Let's finish the meeting," Marcus said. The resolution meeting took 11 minutes. Jen walked the table through the restructuring terms, which were in fact favorable, and which Marcus had reviewed and approved a week earlier through the trust. The vote was called. 5 partners voted in favor. 1. Burroughs abstained, not in protest, but because his hand had not gotten the message from his brain in time, and by the time it did, the vote was already recorded. The resolution passed. Chen notarized the signature page on the spot. He collected the document, returned it to the manila envelope, and set the envelope at the edge of the table nearest to Marcus. The meeting adjourned at 9:22 a.m. Partners and associates filed out slowly. Not quickly. Nobody was in a hurry to be the first one out of the room. Castillo stopped at the door and turned back. She looked at Marcus. He looked at her. "I owe you a better Tuesday," she said. He held her look for a moment. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "But thank you." She nodded and left. Theo was the last associate out. He stopped in the doorway with the particular frozen quality of someone who has something to say and has not decided whether they have the right to say it. Marcus looked at him. "You held that room a long time," Theo said. Marcus nodded once. "You get better at it," he said. Theo left. Holloway was still seated 2 chairs to the right of the head. He had not moved since sitting down. The jacket was creased across his back. The Patek Philippe was still in his palm. Marcus did not go to him. There was nothing to say to Garrett Holloway that Garrett Holloway was not already. In this moment, saying to himself. That was the thing about men like Holloway. The collapse, when it finally came, was always interior. The building had always agreed with him. Now it had stopped, and he was alone with the echo. Marcus picked up the manila envelope. He stood. He straightened the reading glasses on his face. He walked to the door. He paused for 1 second in the doorway, not for Holloway. For the view, the window, Lake Michigan, the gray winter sky going slowly lighter above the waterline. He had looked at that view for 14 months from the wrong side of the glass, pushing a mop, and it was the same view it had always been. It did not know the difference. Water and sky did not care whose name was on the document. He walked out. In the hallway, Jen was waiting. "The afternoon items," Jen said. Marcus nodded. "The 40,000, he said. Today, the discretionary fund, lobby and security staff, all of them." Jen made a note, done by 4. "And no announcement," Marcus said. "It goes in as a facility allocation. Nobody needs to know where it came from." Jen looked at him over the edge of his reading glasses. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," Marcus said. He walked to hallway B. He pushed open the supply closet. He hung the garment bag back on the second hook from the left, not because he planned to leave it there, but because it had hung there for 3 months waiting, and it deserved one last moment in the place where it had done its waiting. He took off the charcoal jacket. He held it over one arm. He walked back through the corridor toward the elevator lobby. The mop handle was still leaning against the baseboard where it had come to rest at 7:47 a.m. Someone, he did not know who, had propped it carefully upright against the wall. Not left on the floor. Not moved to the supply closet. Just set right, quietly, by someone who had felt the weight of leaving it wrong. Marcus looked at it for a long moment. He thought about his mother. He thought about 31 years and a gold-toned pair of reading glasses with one arm wrapped in electrical tape, the left one, repaired on a kitchen table in a two-bedroom apartment in Inglewood, 1987. By a woman who believed that broken things could be fixed if you had the patience to fix them and the sense to keep wearing them until you did. He reached up and took the glasses off his face. He folded them carefully, left arm, then right, the way she had always done, and placed them in the soft cloth pouch in his breast pocket. He picked up the mop. He carried it back to the supply closet, leaned it in its place, and walked to the elevator at 4:17 p.m. That afternoon, Diane Okafor was at the front desk when her work email notification chimed. She opened it. She read it twice. The email was from the firm's payroll processing service, with a CC to the trust's attorney. It described a discretionary allocation from a facility management fund, $40,000, distributed equally across all lobby and building security staff, effective immediately. With no further conditions and no repayment requirement, the allocation was listed under a fund referenced only by its trust number. Diane sat very still at her desk. She looked at the lobby floor, the marble clean, the morning's wet shine long since dried to its regular quiet gleam. She thought about the coffee cups. Every Tuesday, 14 months. She thought about the way she had looked at the name on the sign-in sheet that first night and felt, without being able to explain it, that this was a man who deserved to be called by his name. She did not know the full story yet. She would piece it together over the next few days, the way people do, through the corridor conversations that could not stay contained, through the particular quality of silence that Holloway carried with him when he walked past the front desk in the afternoon. She would understand it, eventually, in its entirety. But in that moment, at 4:17 p.m., on a cold Tuesday in February, sitting at the front desk of a firm she had worked at for 9 years, Diane Okafor read the email a third time and allowed herself to feel something she could not name but recognized immediately. It felt like being called by your name in a room that had forgotten it. And that is the thing about this story. The thing I want you to sit with for a moment before you go. Marcus Webb did not spend 14 months in a gray uniform because he had no options. He had options. He had always had options. He spent 14 months in that uniform because he had made his mother a promise. And he kept it, because the only way to truly know a place is to be the person that place is designed not to see. Because some truths can only be found on your hands and knees. What Garrett Holloway could never understand, what men like Holloway are structurally unable to understand, is that the power in that building was never in the Brioni suit, or the Patek Philippe, or the chair at the head of the table. It was in the man who mopped the floor under that table every Monday and Thursday morning, and knew, with absolute precision, what the marble sounded like when something was dropped on it. You know someone like Marcus. You might be someone like Marcus. Someone who has spent too long being looked through, talked past, moved around like furniture, your competence taken for granted, and your presence overlooked. Somebody who has earned a room they have never been invited to sit down in. The moment always comes. The question is whether you are ready. Not loud, not explosive. Ready the way Marcus was ready, with the right document in the right hands, with 14 months of patience behind you, with the understanding that the most powerful thing you can do in a room full of people who have underestimated you is sit down, unfold your glasses, read the page, and sign your name in the silence. If this story landed the way I believe it did, tell me in the comments who you were thinking about when Marcus walked through those conference room doors. Tell me about the person who called you by your name when the building had forgotten it. I read every one of those comments, and I mean that. And if you haven't subscribed yet, right now is the moment. Hit that button. There are more stories in this series, and the next one will make you need to put your phone down for a second. Same quiet, same truth, same room that doesn't see who it's dealing with until it's already too late. Marcus Webb mopped the floor of a building he owned and waited until the right Tuesday. The glasses his mother fixed at a kitchen table in 1987 were on his face when he signed his name. That is where the dignity was kept. That is where it had been all along.